I want to welcome you back to our session of talking about how to share Christ with others. One of the greatest things that you'll ever do in sharing Christ with other people is to tell them what God has done for you. That's an incredibly powerful tool that God has given. Your story is important not only to God, but it's important to other people. And there will be people that God will give you to share with. Now, I'm visiting with Wayne Jenkins, a friend of mine for many, many years, and a guy that I respect so much, and what you've done in sharing Christ with people around the world and in your own state and in your own community. Wayne, one of the problems I found when I was a pastor, and of course most of my life has been as an evangelist, but when I was a pastor, I discovered that most of the people in the church didn't have meaningful relationships with people who weren't Christians.
That's right.
And it's a natural thing that happens. When you become a Christian, you have all these relationships. And so sometimes the person who will do the greatest job of sharing Christ are the brand new believers.
That's right.
But then as you grow in your faith, you develop strong relationships with other Christians. But then your circle begins to tighten up, and that circle
exactly
becomes those people that you feel the same thing with, and that's great, and that's the way it should be. But we have to somehow break out of that.
That's right.
And develop relationships with people, authentic, real, genuine relationships with people, and share Christ with them. So let's talk about developing relationships with people who perhaps don't think like we think, don't feel what we feel, don't know Christ. So how do we go about doing that? And how do we keep that authentic and real and genuine?
I think Paul says it well in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8, when he says he was delighted not only to share the gospel with them, but to share his life with them. Building that relationship and sharing with them. And I think there are several things that would help us. One is to be intentional. Mm-hmm. We've got to be intentional about saying, look, I'm going to find some people who I don't have a relationship with, and I'm going to build a relationship with them. It may be that you've moved into a new neighborhood. It may be a neighborhood you've been in for a while, but you don't know your neighbors, but you're going to work at doing that. And then Paul says, I've become all things to all men, whereby through some means I may reach some. Paul was willing to do some things to do that. I recall one pastor saying that a particular sport he liked, and he entered competition in that sport, and he needed several people to work with him. Well, his first thought was to get his staff and build relationship, stronger bond in his staff. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. I am going to reach out and find some people out here that like that sport who would participate with me, who are lost or unbelievers. And that's what he did. He said, I had to put up with some stuff. Sometimes some language, sometimes some things that I didn't like. But in the process, he was able to build a relationship with some unbelieving men and win some of them to Christ as a result of being intentional about it.
I think that, it's this developing relationships be a lot easier than we think, because there are people all around us that we need to, when I started running and ran the Greek marathon and all, and I found a camaraderie among runners, that was just, and of course it's been a while. People can look at me and tell it's been a while since I've run. But I found this camaraderie among runners. And what I discovered, that it was very easy to share my testimony because we had so much in common, and they would ask me questions. And those questions, for me to be honest, I had to tell them what Jesus had done for me. So if you just say, okay, Lord, I want you to use me to develop a relationship to share. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. It's back to that prayer element, the praying that God would open some doors for you to build a relationship with some of these people. You want to be intentional in your praying, intentional in your actions to build them. The second thing you've already brought up, and that was when you were running, you're aware of the people who are around you. Who is it that's around you? That it could be a relative, it could be somebody you work with, it could be somebody that you see on a regular basis all the time that you've just taken for granted. They're there, they're good people, but you've got to build that relationship with them and work at it.
Yeah, and I'll go back to my running illustration. I was running with these guys, and you guys get talking, with each other, and one of the guys says, hey man, I went out with these women and did this and did that. And then he hits me and says, hey, Sammy, what about you? And, I said, well, I tell you what, I used to do that. But
Yeah.
you know what? One day something happened to change it. What happened? And then I
Yeah.
told him my testimony. So that's the kind of thing where
Yeah.
that awareness and again, fear, you have to overcome the fear once you are aware.
Right.
But anyway, so be intentional,
Be aware.
be aware. What else?
And then be a friend. Look for ways to develop that relationship. In other words, there may be, like this pastor who got them in on an activity. It may be that you take the person out to eat.
Mm-hmm.
It may be. It could be that there is a certain place. We found we called it our fishing pond.
Mm-hmm.
It was a restaurant where the same waiters were there and waitresses were there, and so we built a relationship with them because we went back to the same place, to the same people all the time. But we built that relationship when we were able to share the gospel with them. So it's finding ways to do acts of kindness, to invite them to places, to invite them to have to go do something for them, but some way to nurture that relationship with them.
And let me just say that people, I don't care who they are, at some point in time, they're going to get sick.
Yeah.
They're going to have problems. They're going to go through struggles in their marriage. They're going to, and if you see those situations and you're developing a relationship, reach out to that person. Sometimes it's just a matter of saying, hey, you need somebody to talk to? Hey, feel free,
That's right.
Or sometimes it may be they need groceries. Help them with that,
Right.
or whatever it might. But that's what you're talking about.
That's right.
Reaching out to them at that point of need. Okay. What else?
And then the final thing is be a witness. Now, if you stop at the other three, I've become aware that I'm intentional. I've become aware of these people around me. I've made a friend. But if you never get around to giving them the gospel, then you just made a friend, but you've not made a friend for Jesus. And that's what we're talking about, the difference. What you've got, it may be, now that I've built this relationship, I can ask Bill to come on and go with me to Bible study, a small group.
Right.
It may be that I invite Bill to go to Sunday school, or maybe invite Bill to go with me to a worship service or a special kind of service. I can begin to work that way. It may be just like what you said. I got an opportunity that God gave me to share my testimony with that person. But keep on using those things that we have as access to us, and those tools that we've got to now be a witness to that person, and a constant exposure to the gospel.
We talked earlier in one of our sessions about building a platform, and the platform is our life. And this is a part of that platform.
That's right.
Is that right? So,
That's exactly
we
right.
build a platform. But one of the tragedies would be to build a platform and never use it.
That's exactly right.
So we need to build that platform where people know that we care about them, we love them, we're friends to them. And then within that context, then we begin to share Jesus. And my guess is that most people listening right now have many people already in that sphere.
That's right.
And one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to write out who it is that you already know that you need to develop that relationship for Christ with. It's people that you need to begin to reach out to, people that you need to be intentional. And so just begin to make a list of those people and just begin to pray for them, as we've talked about in our prayer sessions. And then you ask God to use you to reach into their hearts and their lives and begin to share Christ with them.